It's Stan Veit's History of the Personal Computer. From Altair to IBM, A History of the PC Revolution. By Stan Veit, Editor-in-Chief Emeritus, Computer Shopper. Copyright 1993 and 2026 by Stan Veit and A-Books Creativity Incorporated. Read by Randy Kindig and David Greelish.
Chapter 19, The Computer Pack. This chapter is a collection of 4 short articles. It covers the PolyMorphic, Heathkit, George Morrow, and Bill Godbout stories. PolyMorphic, the computer for the professional. PolyMorphic was a strange company that always went its own way in hardware and software. The thing is, a lot of people went with it, and the company lasted longer than most manufacturers of 8-bit computers. Shortly after the introduction of the Altair, a little computer called the Micro Altair appeared on the market. It was a rectangular box that contained a power supply and an S100 motherboard with 4 slots. You could install a CPU memory and I/O board combined and a video board, and you would have a fully operational computer in the space of a fat book. If you needed more than 4 boards, there was an edge connector that allowed 2 polys to be mated side by side. Not only that, but the video board eliminated the necessity for an expensive terminal. All you had to do was connect a keyboard and cassette recorder, and you were in business. Shortly after the first ad appeared, Ed Roberts objected to the use of the name Altair, so they changed the name to Poly88.
PolyMorphic's next effort was the design of a tabletop computer that remained their basic platform for years. The original version was known as the 8813. This was an attractive outer wooden cabinet containing the same boards as the Poly88, a disk controller board and up to 3 floppy disk drives with 90K capacity each. Many computers at that time had moved to the new Z80, but Poly stuck with the 8080 because they had a proven design for a processor board. The 8813 could be used with as little as 16K, but for practical purposes, more memory was essential. The video displayed 16 lines of 64 characters per line. One problem with the video system was that you could not connect a standard video terminal to the machine. You had to use the built-in video board and an external keyboard. PolyMorphic did not use the standard CP/M operating system used by most other 8080 computers at the time. Instead, it had its own operating system and its own disk BASIC. Owners of Poly systems did not seem to mind, and quite a few business applications were written for this computer. And there's a picture on this page of a complete PolyMorphic system.
The price of the Poly 8813 was around $4,000, which placed it in the high end of the personal computer market. From the time of its design to the end of the market and of the company, the PolyMorphic 8813 was an evolving design and a constant moneymaker. In spite of the loyalty of the users, PolyMorphic could not sustain its business as a result of the popularity of the IBM PC, and, like many other 8-bit computer manufacturers, went out of business.
Heath, the king of kits. The Heath Company of Benton Harbor, Michigan, had been selling kits for radio and audio test equipment and all kinds of electronic devices. Their expertise in this field was completely unchallenged. The thousands of catalogs they sent out brought electronics into every remote part of the United States. Heathkit designs were made simple and broken down into small steps so that failure was almost impossible as long as the builder followed the instruction book step by step to completion. They also had some retail stores in major markets where builders could get help with their projects. However, when the microcomputer revolution started in 1975, Heath was very slow to join in. They were selling microprocessor training kits when the new computer companies were selling computers.
The computer companies did not bother to write detailed instruction books and test them for accuracy. Their instructions would read, solder in all the resistors after checking the schematics for the correct values. Next, solder in all the capacitors. Or be careful not to make solder bridges. The first time I assembled an MSI kit, I used the photograph in the advertisement to find out how the chassis went together. They never gave us a mechanical drawing of the assembly with the first 10 kits I sold. I remember listening to one of my salesmen asking the customer, "You sure you know how to solder this? It sure isn't a Heath kit." When Heath finally came up with kits worthy to be called Heathkit, they were strange machines compared with the industry standards. They didn't use any of the standard programs and were a breed unto themselves.
The H8 was the first 8080 computer made by Heath. It had a sloping front panel mounting a 9-digit keypad, which could be used to program it in machine language. However, it used octal notation rather than the hex notation, which was used on the S100 machines. It was a bus machine with a unique 50-pin bus. Expansion cards and peripherals were available for the machine, including the memory and speech cards, the H7 floppy disk assembly, and the H10 paper tape reader punch. The H8 needed at least 16K of memory for nominal operation and 48K if a floppy disk was to be used. The maximum memory capacity was 64K. The H8 had no internal video, but was designed to be used with a terminal such as the H9 video terminal, which had a 12-inch CRT. Heath started with their own operating system, HDOS, for disk operation, but added CP/M capability to give their users the ability to use all of the software coming on the market for what was becoming the industry standard. The basic H8 kit sold for only $350, but there was almost nothing you could do with the basic kit. You had to add memory boards and I/O boards and a terminal and disk system to really use the H8.
The Heath Company made a deal with Digital Equipment Corporation to incorporate the DEC LSI-11 CPU into a machine called the H11, which can be thought of as the first 16-bit micro. The resulting computer was supposed to be able to run PDP-11 software, but it was extremely limited because of its puny memory. The H11 was a disappointing effort for the customers who thought they were getting a cheap DEC PDP-11. The Heath Company started to fall on bad times at the start of the 1980s. The chip revolution had changed the entire electronics business, and people no longer built electronic kits because entire portions of the equipment were built into a single chip. The flood of imports had lowered the prices of radio, audio, video, and test equipment to levels where the kits cost more than completed units. However, he still had its value as a maker of educational and training equipment and texts. The company was bought out by Zenith Radio Corporation, who brought out completely new lines of computers.
And page 229 starts off with a Heathkit H89 computer ad from 1979. No loose ends, all-in-one computer floppy I/O 16K RAM, $1,595. The Heath Zenith H89 was the first of these machines and by far the most popular of the brand. It was sold as the Z89 in its factory-built version, or H89 as a Heath kit. The ZH89 was a desktop integrated computer with a full keyboard and a 12-inch non-glare CRT. Next to the CRT was a single 5.25-inch floppy disk drive. The double density version of the disk controller could store 160K, and there was also an optional external floppy disk and a hard drive disk option which could store 11 megabytes. The standard unit came with 48K of RAM, and it could be expanded to 64K. An unusual feature of the H89 was the fact that it used two Z80 CPU chips. One ran the computer while the other ran the video terminal functions. The HZ89 was able to run the standard CP/M operating system and all the software available under that system. It quickly achieved a reputation as a solid workhorse of a computer and had a large and loyal user community.
The H89 kit was either $1,895 for a white CRT or $1,995 for a green CRT. Assembled units were $2,895 for either a built-in disk drive or a double density controller for a double density drive and a hard disk. The factory-built version was $3,895. The engineers at Zenith had an answer to the IBM PC, which was quickly obsoleting the Z80 computers. It was their Z100 series, which also sold as a kit under the Heathkit H designation. The series consisted of the Z120, which was an all-in-one business computer with a 12-inch CRT. The Z110 was a flat-top computer designed with high-resolution graphics to mount an RGB color monitor. The Z100 series had two microprocessors. One was an 8088 designed to run under MS-DOS and the same 16-bit software as the IBM PC. The other CPU was an 8-bit 8085, which could run CP/M and all the thousands of programs available under that system. All the Heath computers had used their own bus system, but the S100 departed from that and used a standard S100 bus. Floppy disk storage was 320K per disk, and a 5 megabyte hard disk was available.
The Z100 started out like a house on fire. It was an excellent computer, and it had the best color graphics of any machine on the market in those days. The problem was in the incompatible MS-DOS software. The special versions for the Z100 were not kept current, and the S100 bus made it incompatible with the developments and expansion boards by third parties. The Z100 was replaced by MS-DOS compatible machines from Zenith. Zenith itself was bought out by Bull Group of France, who closed down the Heath operation completely. The day of the kits was over.
Morrow's MicroStuff. The largest incubator of microcomputer people was the Homebrew Computer Club, an organization that grew out of Bob Albrecht's People's Computer Company and Community Computer Center run by Fred Moore in Menlo Park, California. He had the idea that it would be a good idea for computer enthusiasts to get together to exchange news and ideas, and so, using mailing lists of PCC, he put out a call for such a meeting. The first was held in March of 1975 in a garage belonging to Gordon French. This evolved into the Homebrew Computer Club, which grew rapidly until several hundred people were attending meetings and even spawned a San Francisco branch, which actually met in Berkeley.
George Morrow, a graduate student in mathematics, became interested in microcomputers and with two friends, Chuck Grant and Mark Greenberg, formed a sort of company to make boards for the Altair. However, Morrow had its own ideas of what he wanted to do, and the group split. Morrow went on his own way, and Grant and Goldberg formed Kentucky Fried Computers, which became North Star Computers. The first project George Morrow built was a combination 8080 CPU board and front panel board for either the Altair or MSI. This board had a keypad on it, and it was used for programming the computer in place of the switches and lights used by both the Altair and the MSI. To me, this seemed like a good idea. The hardest thing to build in both machines was the front panel board. Morrow's board eliminated this problem. I sent for one and took it home to build. Upon completion, I found that the board would not work, so I sent it back to Morrow and forgot it for a while. One day, the board came home with a note from George. "Stan," he wrote, "whoever built this board, never let him solder anything ever. This is the worst soldering job I've ever seen." When I told him I was the solder butcher, he laughed and said he meant it. For years after, George teased me about my soldering. He never let me forget it.
The CPU board was a good idea, but was not a success because George had it programming in octal notation while the rest of the 8080 world was using hex notation. Besides, the hobbyists liked to program by flipping switches. George's next project was the design of a 16-bit computer using the paste chip made by National Semiconductor. With his friends Goldberg and Grant, they would design the machine, and Bill Godbout would market it. Although Godbout advertised the machine, it was never completed, and the partners split. George next designed a low-cost 4K memory board, which was made and sold by Bill Godbout. Priced at the low price of $189, the board sold very well, and for the first time, George Morrow was earning real money from his designs. After a while, George left Godbout's distribution and started his own company called Morrow's Micro Stuff to sell his boards. It was a time of rapid expansion in the fledgling microcomputer industry. The demand for cheap memory boards was almost impossible to fill. Most of the people buying computer kits did not realize that they would need much larger amounts of memory until after they had built the computer. Then they looked for the most inexpensive way to fill this need. Small companies like Morrow's Microstuff moved in and sold most of the memory boards.
In 1977, George and Howard Fulmer joined forces to produce a complete computer. This was called the Equinox 100, and although it was well built and came in a very attractive cabinet, it was an 8080 machine at a time that the world was turning to the Z80 processor. The company was short-lived, and George turned to the production of floppy disk systems. Morrow's new products, called Tinker Toys or Discus, were low-cost 8-inch floppy disk subsystems consisting of a controller card, cables, and the disk drive mounted in a cabinet with a power supply. The system came with CP/M and C Basic at no extra cost, and for the first time, an S100 computer owner could be running on a disk for under $1,000. The Morrow systems were a great success.
George again turned to the manufacture of complete computer systems with a line of complete computer systems sold as a package with a video terminal. His company, Morrow's Micro Decisions, made the Z80 computer with 64K of RAM and either one or two floppy disks. The video terminal was made by a terminal manufacturer. The system was sold with CP/M, two versions of BASIC, and an applications package, including WordStar, a spreadsheet, and a financial analysis package. The system also included a shell program, which made it easy to use CP/M. The entire package sold for $1,500 to $2,300, depending on how many drives were included. The Micro Decision system proved to be quite popular for a short time. The IBM PC was turning people toward 16-bit MS-DOS machines.
George Morrow was not one to give up easily. He designed an MS-DOS portable computer called the Pivot. This was different from the bulky luggables like the Compact and IBM Portable that were appearing at that time. The Pivot looked like a small portable radio with a keyboard that folded into the package. At this time, the Internal Revenue Service had a requirement for thousands of portable computers, and George Morrow's Pivot was the closest to their specifications. The Zenith Corporation was after this contract, and to get it, they licensed George Morrow's design for the Pivot. Zenith gave George a choice of how they would pay for the license. Either Morrow could get a lump sum payment for a non-exclusive license, or an exclusive license with a smaller payment and a royalty on every unit sold. George took the larger lump sum payment because he wanted to bid on the IRS contract himself. Zenith won the contract and made so many portables they were able to undersell Morrow in all markets. Shortly after this, Morrow Microdecisions closed its doors.
Bill Godbout, supplier to the computer revolution. Bill Godbout owned a surplus electronics business at the Oakland Airport in Oakland, California, which was both a hangout and a major source of supply for electronics hobbyists and experimenters. He was an avid supporter of the personal computer industry. He advertised in all the new computer magazines, and he would sell you chips in quantities of ones and twos. This was important because the major electronics distributors wanted nothing to do with the computer hobbyists who were springing up everywhere. The distributors simply were not set up to sell in small retail levels. You had to be a company who had an account with them, and the only way they would accept small orders was for engineering samples. Godbout, on the other hand, would sell you any amount you needed, and he wouldn't wait until your check cleared before shipping your parts. The most pressing need of all early computers was for additional memory. Most only came with a few bytes of memory, enough to keep the system operating. You had to add a memory board to do any computing.
Usually, you had to add several boards because the first memory boards only contained 4K of RAM. The memory boards used static RAM, and 4K of RAM used about zero point zero 0.05 amp of power. Aside from the power drain, memory boards were expensive. Bill Godbout realized this, and since his business was a prime source of memory chips, he decided to make and sell his own memory boards. He made a deal with George Morrow to design an S100 board on a royalty basis, and the well-known EconoRAM series of memory boards were born. Selling well below the cost of similar boards from MIT's Altair or MSI, the EconoRAM was a great success. This brand name was extended later to cover boards with 8K, 16K, and 32K for the S100 bus and boards for Heath, Digital Group, and Intel computers. And then on the page is a nice ad for Godbout. Memories are made of these. It says Godbout's ads were a fixture in early personal computer magazines.
The success of the EconoRAM encouraged Bill Godbout to design and build a complete computer. He selected the National Semiconductor 16-bit paste chip as the CPU, and after generating a lot of interest with tracer ads, he had George Morrow go ahead with the design. The computer design was never completed, a victim of the fallout between George Morrow and Bill Godbout, and Godbout did not develop complete computers until a few years later. Eventually, Godbout developed and sold a complete line of S100 computer boards and complete computers under the name CompuPro. These machines were considered to be of the highest quality and competed with Crememco. Bill Godbout stopped his electronics component mail order business completely and concentrated on computer manufacturing. He changed the name of his company to VSN to reflect this change.
CompuPro machines were the longest lasting of the S100 computers, and many of them are still in use. The well-known author Jerry Purnell was a great fan of CompuPro computers and extolled them in his columns for their well-deserved excellence. Bill Godbout was at the start of the personal computer revolution and was in business until the changeover to MS-DOS machines. He contributed much needed advice and credit to early computer pioneers. Very good. Um, and I just did a video where a gentleman had, brought an H8 computer setup, Heathkit, to the Jacksonville group. Did you happen to see that by chance, Randy? That little
I
short
saw
video of
parts of
mine?
it.
But he
Yeah,
was
yeah,
he,
yeah.
he wasn't able to turn it on because it hadn't been tested, but he built it himself and it was very nice and everything showed that off. He had what was mentioned here, the H8 computer, I think the H7 disk drive, the H19 terminal. So,
Nice.
but yeah, I had heard of
Yeah.
Godbout and I had a CompuPro, just a push button S100 later machine back in the day. I had acquired. I had it for quite a
Did you?
while. Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
very,
I've
very
I've heard the
basic.
name CompuPro.
Hmm. So yeah, I think they were like if you look at some PC computer mags in the early 80s, you'll still see the here and there Godbout ad, S100 stuff because people were still doing stuff then. Even up until like the mid 80s, some people were running S100 computers, especially with um, I think some 16-bit running MS-DOS on them and stuff.
Never have owned an S100 computer.
Never?
Wouldn't
Oh,
swear. No,
yeah,
no.
I got a few of them
Not
really
that
early
I,
on.
not that I'm aware. I mean, the Osborne was not an S100 computer, was it?
No, no.
Yeah.
Oh, was it? Yeah, it was.
It ran CPM,
Yeah, I
but
think
I
no,
don't,
it's S100 processor
is
technology.
it?
I think so. Now I think about it, it's only three slots though, but yeah, would have to look it
Yeah.
up. So yeah, not much to say else, I guess. I've never owned a Morrow or polymorphic. So I think I had a Morrow board before S100 board because I acquired quite a few of them early on when I started collecting in the mid 90s.
Yeah, this chapter was very interesting because it again, it's kind of a throwback chapter because he's talking about machines that were developed pretty early,
Yeah.
in the personal computer timeline. And these are machines that never got a lot of traction. And most people probably haven't heard of any of these three machines.
Well, that's the
And
funny
this,
thing is in the big picture, they didn't. But on a smaller scale and within their time frame, they were very successful. I mean, they were
yeah,
probably making some good money. I don't know how many employees they had or anything, but yeah, they were cranking along there for a little while.
yeah. I mean, some of these came out before the Apple II
Yeah.
came out.
Like I said, the
So
Godbout stuff's much later, or they
yeah,
went on much later. So,
yeah.
no
Interesting
interviews,
chapter.
no interviews with any related people on floppy days.
No, no,
You
no,
better get
no.
busy.
Afraid not. I'll be having one with the guy who just wrote the book on the Sphere computer.
Oh, good.
Um,
Yeah. Oh, let's talk about that a
and
minute. Yeah,
that
I got the book and I've only been able to gloss through it, but it looks very good and just super well researched and
it
super
is.
well researched and
It is very
documented
well researched.
and
It's
documented.
amazing. It's like how in the heck did you get all this information about a computer that was only on the market for like a year?
But
And
that'll be great. Look forward to that one.
yeah,
When
now
I,
that's not the developer, right? I mean, he wasn't the developer, but he
yeah,
sure gathered a lot of information about it. Uh, that being Ben Zotto, and the
yeah.
book is Go Computer Now.
And Stan Veit just barely mentions the sphere, which I don't remember what chapter at this point,
Yeah,
but was early on. And the tell me if the biggest thing I remember is that, he got one. We read it. Is it one we read together? I don't think so, but
we did.
oh, we
We
did?
did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so he got one and put it on display, never could get it to work. And finally some guy showed up and bought it and got it working.
Yeah. Yeah, he
So,
doesn't have a lot of it was a short chapter as I recall.
yeah, but very interesting.
So
Yeah.
anyway, there were a lot it just goes to show you, when you see chapters like this, that there were a lot more machines out there than
Hmm.
people even realize. I mean, there were just a huge number in the 70s and 80s.
So in the show notes will just be a good page for each of the three that show you some good pictures of the different systems and more information. The one about Godbout's at the Smithsonian. That's interesting. And then I went on eBay to see what I could find. And just looking at those real quick, I think polymorphic. Did I find a system? Oh no, I only found like a disk
Um,
drive. I mean a
yeah, it was a
diskette.
disc.
Yeah, I couldn't
Yeah, it was
find
a
anything else
discount.
really. I think there's boards in there. But then, April 15th, 2026, we're recording this. So as of now, here's like a Morrow micro decision that was sold about a month or two ago. So there's a few Morrow related things that are on the market. And then Godbout. Oh yeah, I found a really good complete system here. 7 boards, CompuPro. Sold for, I guess they took a best offer just under $1,450. Weighs 42 pounds, it says. Without packing and crating material.
I hope that was a pickup and not a shipment.
1981. So this eBay auction, this is a machine from 1981. That's way late in the S100 world.
Yeah, I
And
guess it would be. Yeah.
so, but yeah, those things are. It's got the full big giant power supply. All right, well, tell us about the next chapter. We will cut this one short. Or do
So
you
the
have it
next
handy?
chapter is PCs that never made it.
All right.
It's a pretty short chapter. It's
Oh,
only it's only about 4 pages, I believe, four full
okay. So we
pages.
might do back-to-back ones, but
Yeah, we might want to do back-to-back chapters again. But that sounds like a very interesting chapter to me. PCs that never made it.
okay.
Yeah.
We'll see what he has to say. All right. Until next time.
All right.
See ya.
Thank you.